If it's Tuesday at 2 o'clock, it's time for WorthPoint Chats with Harry Rinker. I'm Greg Watkins, the editor at WorthPoint, and here we have Harry. Harry, where are you today?
Well, I'm in Kentwood, Michigan today at my home, enjoying what looks like some fine spring weather out there, and excited too. Spring is kind of a fun time in the north because all of a sudden the indoor show season is open and the outdoor show season starts. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But it's interesting when you look at the antiques and collectibles trade regionally. There are cycles to it all, and when people talk to me about auctions in New York, and I'm always talking to my clients who say to me, well, we want to sell something, and I said, you got to pick the right time of the year to do it. You don't want to try to do anything around April 15th. No, you don't. Because
nobody got any money at that time.
Well, I made the mistake of that with my Institute for the Study of Antiques and Collectibles. I tried to schedule two-day jewelry seminars over the April 15th weekend, and that didn't work. And all we heard from the people was, we'd like to come, but we're not coming over the tax weekend. So, it is odd. Antiques and collectibles have selling seasons. Most people don't understand that, but the most obvious one is that if you're going to sell Christmas stuff, you want to sell it in September, October, November. You don't want to try to sell it in January, February, and March. But where you see the biggest change in the antiques and collectibles field from the selling season point of view is in the colors that you see. In the spring and summer, pastel color stuff sell better, whether it's quilts or whatever it is. If it's in a pastel color, people seem to like it better in the spring and the summer. Get to winter time, and it's the bold colors, the red reds and the blue blues and the green greens. And so if you're a smart antique mall dealer or you're a smart seller in the trade, you shift your inventory to respond. And I think most people don't even realize they do that. Now, I remember as a kid growing up, spring cleaning and fall cleaning, because I lived in this big nucleated environment. I had 28 aunts and uncles, and every spring the ladies would descend on the neighborhood, and they'd spend 3-4 days cleaning everybody's house, and that meant rotating the curtains and the linens, taking the rugs out and beating them on the line. Now, I have to tell you, that is never a time when I came home from school early or found an excuse to hang out at school all the time, because, man, there was nothing like getting under those rugs all over the clothesline and have to whack at them with a rug beater. I mean, that was not my favorite sport. But anyway, we were talking leading into this, and that is what's going on in the trade. Well, this is a time when all the antique dealers that have been in the South, down in Florida, Georgia, and that general area, are coming back up north to the flea markets in the north, whether those flea markets are in Michigan and Wisconsin, or whether those flea markets are in the eastern part of the United States. The end of April, the last weekend of April, is always the big weekend. That's the first of the Renninger's extravaganzas in Pennsylvania. And what makes it so much fun is the fact that as the dealers come up, they've had all winter to gather new merchandise down south. And so, the first of the shows, the April show, is called Fresh to the Market. Now, there are two other shows, one in June and one in September, the last one being the one where they have up here, then they go back down. But, the summer show, if you go to the summer show, you see such much of the same stuff that you saw when they came up in the spring, with some additions, of course. And then by September, it's all pretty well worn out. And then it goes right through a circuit. It goes through Renninger's in Pennsylvania, then up to Brimfield. Brimfield is May 10th to the 15th this year. There used to be a 1-week separation. Now there's a 2 between them. And then Brimfield does the show in early September, and then Renninger's does the one in late September. But it's not just the East Coast. Allegan, which is one of my favorite flea markets here in Michigan, is now open. It's an odd flea market in that it's only open one day a month at the Allegan Fairgrounds, Sunday, which is terrible for me because I have my radio show from 8 to 10, and so by the time I get in the car and get down there, it's 11 o'clock. Now, a lot of people say, well, you missed all the good stuff, Harry, but my attitude about flea markets is, you go anytime. If you know what you're looking at, if you're a good, serious collector, you won't miss anything. I mean, it's all there. It's all part of the game. I noticed in the paper the other day that Kane County, which is one of those magical names in flea markets, and I have to tell you, when I use the word flea market, Greg, I'm talking about an antiques and collectibles flea market, a market that it's heavily with antique. I'm not talking about swap meets or southern flea markets where they have these gosh awful peanuts that are boiled peanuts in water and you eat this soggy garbage. But anyway, enough.
I tell you, boiled peanuts, I just don't get it. I'm a California
No, I've tried them. I've been a good sport about it, Greg, but not for me.
I've tried it too, and I don't get it.
But they use the word flea market very differently in the South than we do up in the North. But antiques and collectibles flea market. When I first started to trade, there was what I called badge of honor flea markets. Flea markets you had to go to say you've been there. And, so Brimfield was one, Renninger's Extravaganza another. Kane County was one. In fact, I did a wonderful 1-hour special for HGTV when I was a collector inspector there. We just picked 5 flea markets and did them, and one of them was Kane County. And Kane County has always been one of my fun fleas. It's one of the only flea markets I nearly didn't come out alive, by the way. I had written a story for Worman's where I listed categories in decline. I learned my lesson after the first year. There were no more categories in decline listed in Worman's after that introduction. But some sweet little old lady who was like about 5 foot tall came up and attacked me with her umbrella and said, "You ruined the Hummel market. You made my Hummels lose value." And she's beating on me. I had to call security to get her out of there. But anyway, no, listen, Kane County, a great flea market. But Palmer Wharfs up in Oregon, the great Portland Expo show in the summer is a classic. Down in California, Long Beach, California is my favorite of them. I've been to Pasadena. When I first went to Pasadena in the 80s, it had a large antique sector, and then it kind of fell back. But now the antique sector is back again, so it's kind of fun to go to Pasadena, too. So you got Pasadena there. First Monday down in Texas, another big one. Scott's Markets down in Atlanta. Well, you know about Scott's Markets in Atlanta.
I do know about Scott's, yes.
You've been there.
I have been. It's very nice. And it's mostly indoors.
Right.
Scott's.
Which is, if you're in the South in the summertime, is a good thing.
That's right. They do have a section of outdoor stalls, but otherwise there are two big facilities that straddle the freeway. So you have to choose which side you're going to go to first when you head out to Scott's.
Well, and Scott's also now working up in Ohio, and then there was Mid-Atlantic and in Charlotte. I mean, I really consider myself fortunate because I had a chance to go to this. I have never been to the Daytona swap meet, and trust me, I will not go because from what I've heard, it's all merchandise like tube socks. And so, in fact, when we were down to Mount Dora this winter, I drove up to Mount Dora, which is the Renninger's facility in Florida, and they didn't have an extravaganza weekend, but they had an antique building, which was one thing. And they had a flea market building, so my wife and I, of course, went to the antique building first. I said, let's go up to the flea market building. And it was a flea market, man. I mean, it was used this, obsolete that. I mean, it just was except for the pickle stand. I love the pickle stand. I love pickles. And they had a barrel pickle stand there. So, forget the antiques and collectibles, but the pickles were good in the building.
Okay, so no boiled peanuts, but the pickles.
No, they had boiled peanuts. More than one stand, actually, too. Oh, yes.
Right, but you would prefer the pickles over the peanuts.
I would buy the pickles. Yeah, I like the pickles. But anyway, enough of all this. We have a couple of objects to look at today, and let's take a look at the first of these objects, an interesting object that came in. Now, in a way, you have to read the letters. Let's get this is the cup and saucer. You're looking
right.
for it, I can tell.
I'm getting it here.
Yeah, this came from a person, Art down in Garland, Texas, sent me a picture. This it says, "I believe," I always get nervous when the letters start, "I believe, I have a rare set of occupied Japan cup and saucer." Now, he has one cup and saucer, not the whole dinnerware service, not anything. And he says, all the items are in excellent condition. The cup is 1.5 inches high by 1 1/4 inches diameter. The saucer is 3 inches in diameter. He said, I found a mark on the bottom of it, KS and a wreath. And he says, I've been trying to identify the mark, and I can't find it anywhere. So he says, I've not seen a similar pattern on the internet so far. What can you help me for? Well, I have to tell you, the word rare for me today in the antiques and collectibles game is a flag. Nothing is rare. Let's get rid of the word rare. It doesn't belong anywhere in the antique and collectible vocabulary. Look, almost everything we deal with today is mass-produced. If there is one, there's probably several hundred out there somewhere. And come on, made in occupied Japan dinnerware was made in huge quantity. Now, it's very interesting about this mark because I tried to identify this mark using several mark sites up on the net, Gothenburg.com for this, and I couldn't find it. So I sent it down to you to try your marks thing, and what was your success?
Yeah, we came up empty.
Yes, and
searched it out. I used all the keywords, Laurel and the KS and Occupy Japan, and it just did not pop at all.
Right. So first of all, we know this was made between August of 45 and April the 28th of 1952, because that's when we occupied Japan. I'm looking at the pattern, and my guess it's a late 40s, very early 50s pattern. But the thing about it is, no matter how many mark books you have, and no matter how good they are, you're not going to have every mark in them. But on your website, you can find other marks in a wreath like this, often with a letter M in them, sometimes with just a plain letter K in them, and the word Japan, and they're all from the 50s. So it's no question this mark dates from the late 40s and 50s. Now, so what if the mark is rare? Who cares? It's a scarce mark, admittedly, but that's not a positive, Greg. He wants this to be a value-added factor. In this case, it's a value-negative factor, because here's the deal when you're dealing with Chinaware. If you're dealing with a Chinaware service, what you have to do is you want the mark to be common, and you want the pattern to be common. And be that way, if some piece gets broken, you can write to Replacements Limited or any one of the, or go up on the net and find the people that deal in this kind of stuff and get the broken piece replaced. When you get a situation like this, Greg, you can't get it replaced. I mean, there's no place you can go. Now, I think he might, if he gets lucky, if Art gets lucky, he can go to replacementslimited.com and try to check the pattern on the saucer. You know, they have what they call rim identification patterns. So we have to get you to do that one of these days, but that'll drive you nuts before it's all done. But they have a rim identification pattern section up there for Made in Occupied Japan, and he may or may not get lucky. But let's suppose he didn't get lucky. Then again, one more, yes, it might be scarce, but it's not valuable because nobody can replace it. Well, what does he have? He has a $5 to $8 cup and saucer is what he has. And no matter what he thinks of it, the truth of the matter is that's all it is. Chances are that this set or this cup and saucer may have been bought at a PX over in Germany, or in Japan, excuse me, and brought back by some GI. It never got exported to the U.S. as a set. What happens is, in wartime, when factories are bombed out and when all kinds of things get destroyed, the easiest industry to restore is the ceramic industry, because all you got to do is get a bunch of mud and some kilns and some patterns, and you're back in business again. And when you look at goods that came out of Japan after the war, you know, the first thing that came out were tin toys, right? Often made from old cans, because every once in a while you take an old tin toy, you can see the old label of a can inside of it. So the toys were easy to get back. Anything quick cast was easy to get back, and pottery was easy to get back. Well, same thing is true in Germany too. Right after the war, the factories around Dresden and elsewhere all got done too. So you know, you have to be careful using the word rare and whatever. But speaking of rare, sometimes you wind up in the trade with one of a kind. Now, I see one of a kind a little bit differently, because one of a kind refers to handmade stuff. And there was an interesting story this week's making its way through the trade papers about a collector in Alabama that bought a Confederate jacket at auction, or from a dealer, or from a dealer or wherever, and he had it since 2009. He bought it at a Civil War History and Memorabilia Convention in 2009. And here is the situation. His name, the collector's name is John Fitzgerald, and he bought this jacket fair and square, and then all of a sudden he published a picture of it. Here is the picture of it, and this has a very specific history. This jacket, it was made for Confederate Army Captain William Layman, and it's a frock coat, was tailored out of homemade jeans by a blind woman from Highland County, Virginia, and was sent to Lehman when he was commanding a company of Virginia infantry soldiers, said president of a memorial museum, the Memorial Hall Museum, a Confederate 125-year-old thing. Now here is the fight. The museum claims that this jacket was stolen from their collection, and they want it back. Now, the situation is that there is no statute of limitations on stolen goods in the antiques and collectibles field, especially if there's a police report filed. And even though the museum claims they have no idea where the last record they had of this jacket was in 1990, the issue is that it's now 2016. So Mr. Fitzgerald went to court and said, look, I want a clear title to this jacket. The jacket had passed through 2 other people's hands before he bought it, and he wants a clear title. Now, if the museum was able to prove that that jacket had been donated to them and they had information there and it was in their files, they might have a case. But guess what? There is no paperwork anywhere in the museum's collection that would indicate that it was misappropriated or appropriated by anybody. They can't show who they got it from. They can't show when they got it. all they have is this kind of vague verbal thing that we had it. And I think the museum is on very shaky grounds here. I think Fitzgerald is right. I think he needs to pursue this through the courts. I mean, there's no dispute about what the jacket is and to whom it belonged, and all the rest of the dispute is, if the museum had it, where are the records? Show me the facts. And this is something that is really, really tenuous. Museums have a bad habit of losing information over years. Now, once we get everything digitized, I don't know how that's going to work out, unless there's a power outage or the computers in the museum get fried. But the name of the game is that you have it. Now, as you may or may not know, Greg, I spent some time in the museum world, and when people brought stuff in and donated it to us, we had very specific forms to fill out. And I'll share 2 stories with you. I had a young man, I was the director of the Historical Society of York County in York, Pennsylvania. And I had a young man come in and say, you have my great-grandfather's grandfather's clock in your collection, and I would like to see it. Now, we had about 10 or 12 tall cases at the time, and so I said to my curator, well, go pull the records and see if you can find out which one of the 12 belonged to his great-grandfather. Well, guess what? It took us hours to go through the records, and finally we figured out what clock it was. So we put the young man, we asked him to come back, give us some time. He came back, and he stood in front of the clock and said, that's my great-grandfather's clock. And I said, son, that may be true, but that's our clock. You don't own it anymore. All right? Seriously.
Right.
That it's now the museum's clock, and so much for your family history, but you can't have it back. Once it's donated, title passes. Well, the other fun story was, one day a guy came into the museum and offered to donate a match set of Chippendale Philadelphia chairs from the 1780s. They were gorgeous, Greg. They were super. You lifted the seat up, and sets of chairs from the colonial period, if they're a set, have Roman numerals on them underneath the seat, on the back chair splat. And by gosh, weren't there Roman numerals? I did say 1 through 6. That would have been really nice, but 6 of the Roman numerals was obviously a set of 12 historically. So I said, do you have a right to donate these? He says, yep, they're joint marital property and so forth, and I'd like to donate them. And this is the thing, is if this stuff is a marital property, you don't need both signatures. You just need one. So the guy signs all the forms, and he leaves, right? 2 hours later.
I can see where it's going.
You can see where this is going. In rushes the wife and says, I want my chairs back. They were from my family and descended down through my family. And I said, but ma'am, I have a signed letter of agreement donating the chairs to the Historical Society, and your husband, whether you like it or not, had the right to do that. Well, if you're a small-town historical society, you want to survive, you're a little understanding in cases like that. So I did call, the chairman of our board at the time was an attorney, and I called him and I told him what happened. He says, "Get rid of the chairs back, Harry." That was a sad loss, man.
I can imagine. Was there a marital discord at the time that
I would say there was. I think they were in the final stages of divorce, as a matter of fact, and this was his way of getting even. But I mean, that is one of the things that we have had to be very, very, very careful about in the antiques and collectible business, and that was to make sure that we had clean title to stuff. Now, the reason I'm telling this story, Greg, is that carries over to when you're buying in the field too. Now, I have had dealers say to me when I was looking at something one time, "Oh, Harry, that was stolen from the Philadelphia Museum," and I'm saying, "Thank you very much, I'm out of here." But there is stolen merchandise that goes through the trade, and we have to be very careful. And so when you buy something from a dealer, don't assume that that dealer or auction house or anybody has clear title. Insist that you have clear title to it. And sometimes things get passed around, and the title is shaky to say the least. You cannot assume. And just like the guy with his Confederate jacket, if that museum can prove it was stolen, it doesn't matter how many owners there are between that jacket and him, he has to return it at his cost. It's there. In fact, that's another one of my. The Chester County Historical Society has a great collection, and they were renovating their museum, and they put a number of things into storage when a curator, well, not a curator, but a preparator there, was stealing stuff and selling it to dealers on the side out of the storage unit. And one day, we at the Historical Society of County, we were doing a Chippendale for the 1976 bicentennial exhibit. We were doing a thing on Chippendale chairs and Pennsylvania Chippendale chairs. And so somebody brought this one in and said, "Here, we think this should be in the exhibit." And the person that was helping us curate said, "Absolutely." And they got in there, and didn't somebody come in during the exhibit and say, "Wait a minute, I think that chair belonged to the Chester County Historical Society"? He said, "I'm going to take a picture of that. I'm going to go down and talk to the board at the Chester County Historical Society, see if they're missing anything." Well, that's how they broke the fact this guy was selling off all the stuff. But the long and the short of it is they called us and said, "Hey, that's our chair, but the guy that loaned it to us came and said, 'I'm withdrawing it,' and he takes it away." Because what he did was he went to the guy he bought it from and demanded his money back. And so there was like a Chinese fire drill where the Historical Society team was trying to track the chairs down. And so they got to that guy. He says, "Oh, I sold it back to the guy that I bought it from." Then they went to that guy who said, "Well, I sold it back to the guy I bought it from and demanded." It took them 4 guys to come back till they got the chair, but they did get it back, which is kind of fun. I mean, when I was at the Historical Society of York County, I shouldn't even tell you these stories, but there was a ring of thieves in Lancaster County. There was a guy who would go around to museums and find out what he liked, and then he'd hire people to steal them. And when they finally busted into his home, they found pieces from, I think, about 16 or 18 museums. So I mean, this whole question of, I've been around the track here, man. But this whole question about clear title is a huge one. It's a really huge issue. And when you buy something, whether it's privately or from a dealer or whatever, please try to make certain. And I mean, where else can you fail to have clear title? Let's suppose somebody's selling something out of an estate, right?
Right.
How do you know that person is the executor? How do you know that person is one of the heirs and is trying to sell it to get his hands on the cash before the other heirs get it there? I mean, this is a tricky business. Title is something people have to be very concerned about. Well, anyway, we have another object, which is kind of a fun object too, because this is one of those cases where, you be careful what you say. We have got a picture of a teapot that came into me. This one from Heather in Monmouth, New Jersey, and she said, "I recently purchased a teapot from a thrift shop, and I'm having trouble identifying the maker. The only mark on the back is a solid black circle with the words 'Made in England' in yellow letters. It looks as though there's another back stamp or writing underneath the back circle, even though it's under the glaze. I've attached a photo to see if you can do it." Well, I'll tell you one thing. A prize to any one of our members who can take a picture of this and read what's under there, because I can't. But anyway, enough of this. It says, "At first glance," she says, let's go back to the teapot, Greg. At first glance, it says, it appears to be a Georgia teapot from the Everyday Collection by Royal Doulton. However, upon further inspection, I'm finding some inconsistencies. The most obvious to me was the missing Royal Doulton logo on the bottom. That would be one. And the other is the lid. Of all the teapots in this pattern, I have a ring of green in the center of the lid, but the one I have is plain white. My question is, do I have a fake, copycat, or reproduction? I think it's a fake intended to deceive. The answer is no, it's not. But let's look at the words that she used. Do I have, if the piece was a Royal Doulton piece, we call it a period piece. If it's an exact copy of a Royal Doulton piece, we call it a reproduction. But most pottery makers don't do that. When another pottery maker or ceramic maker has a successful pattern, they will do a variation of the pattern. The shape will be just about the same, the pattern will be just about the same, but it'll be far enough off to avoid any patent infringement. And that we call a copycat. And this is clearly a copycat from another manufacturer. It's a stylistic copy. It's a copycat from another manufacturer in England that saw the success Royal Doulton was having with the pattern and said, we'll put another one out there fairly cheaply. The McKinley Tariff Act says goods imported in the United States have to be marked with their country of origin. It doesn't say they have to be marked with the maker's mark. Now, chances are that what we're looking at is just a fun little teapot, probably from the mid-20th century, and value-wise, $10 to $12, maybe $15, if you like the pattern. But the thing about it is a stylistic copy any less valuable than the one? Well, suppose you put the two teapots side by side and you didn't tell anybody which is the Royal Doulton one and which is the copycat. My guess is that maybe a third to half of them might think the copycat's the Royal Doulton one and the other one's not. And that's where you have to be real careful for assigning extra value for a manufacturer's name. Yes, Royal Doulton is one of those magic names. People love it. They like to collect it. But the simple truth of the matter, really, is that Royal Doulton is just a manufacturer's name. Buy it because it's aesthetic value. Buy it. It's a cute little teapot. I mean, aesthetically, it's very pleasing. I like the pattern. Here, but you know, it's just that. Make some tea and enjoy yourself. But when you get involved in evaluating antiques and collectibles, there are so many things you need to take under consideration. The one thing it's not is a fake. If it was a fake, it wouldn't have made in England on it at all. It would have had no markings on there and so forth. So, you know, it's fine for what it is on that. Well, anyway, Greg, we got a little business to finish up here as we go through this, and that is this. We're going to shift the date for next week's WorthPoint chat with Harry. Oh, well, no, wait a minute. Let's start with this. Yeah, this is good. We need some letters and comments from our WorthPoint community. We would like to know, what do you have you'd like us to talk about? Send an email to community@worthpoint.com, community@worthpoint.com. Send some information about your object, size, markings, provenance, photographs. Do me a favor, though. Try to put the photographs in JPEGs files. I'm starting to get photographs in 1 million different files that I'm having a lot of trouble opening up on my computer. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to send, and if you have a question about what's going on in the trade, community@worthpoint.com is it. We'll also put a plug in at this point for my Institute for the Study of Antiques and Collectibles. It's in mid-June. We have 3 two-day courses. A 2-day course on researching antiques and collectibles, July 11th and 12th. It's a real insightful look into all the major categories. What are the main reference books? How do you identify an object when all you know about is the object in front of you? We have a wonderful, we're working on a really great 2-day course on paintings, watercolors, and prints. And we're going to look at the whole gamut from amateur art to kitty art to you name it, all the way up to some of the better trained artists. And then finally, the last 2 days, toys, games, and puzzles. Bring your toys, bring your games, bring your puzzles. We'll have a ball. You can find out more information about the Institute and its cost on my website, harryrinker.com. There's a big Institute logo up there. You see it there. Click on that. You'll get the things. Go down to the bottom. There's a registration form. We'd be delighted to have you. But now we have to go back to this Wednesday. Next week, we will be doing this show on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Wednesday, May 11th instead of Tuesday, May 10th. Greg has a commitment, so we're going to adjust the schedule a little bit on that. Please remember that we do these shows live. You can go up on YouTube and watch us as we're recording them. Also, we have a chat message thing here, right? Which is there. And Greg, some news coming up. You're revising the newsletter for WorthPoint. You've got a newsletter coming out very shortly in a new format.
Yes, within we're shooting for next week. The newsletter that we've had is design is stale, and we're gonna update it. We're gonna include some regular features, including a Q&A from you that you write, it's just gonna have a lot more information about WorthPoint and the Worthopedia and the Marks and Digital Library, and how, some tutorials on how to use WorthPoint, and generally we think it's just going to be a better way for us to communicate with both our subscribers and the folks who come to WorthPoint who don't subscribe.
Well, Greg, then until next Wednesday, May the 11th at 2 o'clock, I'll say goodbye to you right now. Been another fun week. Covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, it was good. All right. Well, until next Wednesday, we'll say goodbye.